Should you put away your French press coffee maker? Are uncured meats better than traditionally cured products? Is sautéing just as bad as deep frying? And hey, what is the deal with these ketone drinks that promise all-day energy? In this special mailbag edition of the Nutrition Diva podcast, I'm answering your questions on a whole variety of nutrition topics. Hello, I'm Monica Reinagel, and you're listening to the Nutrition Diva podcast. In addition to covering the latest nutrition news and research, I also love answering your questions about food and nutrition. And today, I have a bit of a grab bag of questions that have been sent in by listeners over the past few weeks, touching on everything from coffee to beef jerky to stir fries. So let's start our show the way I start every day, and that is with a nice cup of coffee. Michelle wrote in after reading an article that warned about a potential link between French press coffee and elevated cholesterol levels. She and her husband have been using a French press to make their coffee every day for the last 8 years or so, and she says their cholesterol levels are currently fine, but understandably, the article made her a bit nervous, so she wanted to know if they should consider switching to a different brewing method. Unfiltered coffee, such as that made in a French press, or a Turkish coffee, which is boiled. These contain compounds called diterpenes, and there are two specific diterpenes, cafestol and kaweol, which have been found in clinical studies to raise LDL cholesterol levels. LDL is what we sometimes call the bad cholesterol. Now, these compounds are largely removed when coffee is brewed through a paper filter, but they do remain in unfiltered coffee. So, yes, drinking unfiltered coffee, such as French press, might raise cholesterol levels. But, as always, the devil is in the details. For one thing, the effect is dose-dependent. So in most of the studies showing a measurable rise in LDL, people were drinking 4 to 6 cups of unfiltered coffee per day. So if you are someone who drinks multiple cups of unfiltered coffee every day and your LDL is trending high, it might be worth experimenting with a filtered coffee for a few months to see if it makes a difference. But if you're only drinking 1 or 2 cups, the impact on your cholesterol is likely to be modest to negligible. In fact, coffee drinkers overall do not have an increased risk of heart disease, and in some studies, moderate coffee intake is actually associated with a lower risk. And this is probably due to coffee's complex mix of antioxidants and other bioactive compounds, which may counterbalance any small increase in cholesterol. So, if you love your French press coffee and your cholesterol levels are in a healthy range, I don't think there's any need to switch to a different method. But it is still a good idea for all of us, whether we are coffee drinkers or not, to check our cholesterol levels periodically, especially as we get older. But if your cholesterol levels are currently healthy and you're otherwise in good cardiovascular health, there's no strong evidence that you need to give up your French press coffee. Next up, we have a question about uncured bacon and hot dogs and whether they are actually better for you than traditionally cured meats. Larry writes, beef jerky made with celery powder instead of chemical nitrates is often marketed as a healthier alternative. Is it? Or should we really be avoiding all sources of nitrites? This is a great question, and it's one that I get over and over again. In processed meats, such as jerky, bacon, and ham, nitrates are used to inhibit bacterial growth. Without them, these kinds of products would spoil much more quickly, and they also wouldn't look or taste the way we expect them to. But there is a potential downside. In the acidic environment of the stomach, nitrites can interact with the protein in those cured meats to form compounds called nitrosamines, and these have been shown to be carcinogenic. In fact, people who eat a lot of cured meats, we're talking on a daily basis, do have an increased risk of stomach and other digestive cancers. This has led many cured meat lovers to gravitate toward brands of jerky, bacon, and other kinds of cured meats that are labeled as uncured, or they say no added nitrites. These products are often made with celery powder, which is a natural source of nitrates. The thing is that nitrites derived from celery behave the same way, both in the meat and in your body, as the synthetic ones. So meat products made with celery powder carry the same potential concerns. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to avoid all sources of nitrites. In fact, vegetables account for more than 80% of the nitrates and nitrites that we consume. Leafy greens and root vegetables like spinach, beets, celery, and lettuce are all rich natural sources, and these are clearly not foods that we want to be avoiding. In fact, the nitrates and nitrites that we get from vegetables may actually be beneficial because they can be converted in the body into nitric oxide, which helps regulate blood pressure and supports vascular health. Even better, a diet that's high in fruits and vegetables, and therefore nitrates, can actually reduce the risks associated with eating cured meats. Stay with me here. This is because the vitamin C that is in these foods helps to block the conversion of nitrites into nitrosamines in the digestive tract. So the strongest health risks have been linked with high and frequent consumption of cured meats coupled with a low intake of fruits and vegetables. So the bottom line here is that enjoying jerky or smoked salmon once in a while is not likely to pose a meaningful risk, especially if your diet also features plenty of produce. But it really doesn't matter whether your jerky is cured with celery powder or synthetic nitrites. Okay, our next question is about fried foods and what actually belongs in this category. Lisa wrote in with the following question. I was reminded again by your recent podcast on seed oils to limit my consumption of fried foods. But do you make a distinction between pan-fried and deep-fried? I've been foregoing deep-fried foods at restaurants lately, but occasionally I will have pan-fried foods, thinking that that's a better choice. I'm just wondering if you think that's a reasonable decision, or am I just fooling myself? You are not fooling yourself, Lisa. I do think that there is a meaningful difference between deep-fried foods and something that's sautéed or stir-fried in a pan. Deep frying involves completely submerging food in very hot oil. Heating the oil to this temperature can create harmful compounds which are then deposited onto the food. And this is especially a concern when the oil is reused multiple times, as is common in restaurants. With each cycle, the oil becomes more oxidized and can break down into more potentially harmful byproducts. Pan frying, or sautéing, on the other hand, typically uses a much smaller amount of oil, maybe just a tablespoon or two in a skillet, and that's often not enough to qualify as frying in the traditional sense, at least from a nutritional standpoint. Plus, the oil that you're using for sautéing is usually fresh, and it's discarded after one use, and that makes a difference. Now, of course, there is a gray area here. If you're using enough oil in a pan that the food is more or less floating in it, well, then you're drifting into shallow frying territory, and that does share more characteristics with deep frying. An air fryer can be a great way to get more of that deep fried crunch, but with a minimum of added oil or risk. So your instinct is a good one. Avoiding deep-fried foods at restaurants where the oil is used repeatedly and the fat content is quite high is a sensible move. Sautéing or pan-frying foods at home is less of an issue. Just be sure you're using fresh oil each time. And our final question today comes from Joel, who is wondering about zero-calorie energy drinks that claim to provide all-day energy from ketones. Joel coaches high school athletes, and the kids that he works with have gotten very interested in these zero-calorie energy drinks that claim to provide all-day energy courtesy of ketones. And he's wondering if these are a good choice for those kids. Ketone-based energy drinks are definitely having a moment, especially among fitness enthusiasts and young athletes who are looking for an edge. And many of these drinks do contain actual ketones, or precursors that your body converts to ketones, which can be used as an alternative fuel source. So this essentially mimics what happens in your body if you are fasting or perhaps following a ketogenic diet. But the idea that they're going to provide all-day energy, that is largely marketing hype. Research has consistently shown that exogenous ketones, these are the ones that come from outside your body, don't reliably improve physical or mental performance. In fact, we have many well-designed studies which have found no benefit compared to plain water, electrolyte drinks, or carbohydrate-based energy drinks. Some studies even report that ketone drinks can impair performance, especially in high-intensity activities, because they can interfere with how the body uses carbohydrates, which are the muscle's preferred fuel source during exercise. There's also the issue of side effects. The ketone salts that are used in some of these products can cause nausea or bloating, other kinds of digestive upset. And while they're probably safe in the short term for healthy adults, we don't have a lot of data on long-term use, especially in adolescents. So what are healthier and more effective options? For those engaging in endurance or high-intensity training, carbohydrate-based drinks, with or without electrolytes, are still the gold standard for sustained energy and performance. But sometimes people who are reaching for energy drinks aren't trying to fuel athletic activity. They're just hoping that an energy drink will make them feel more alert. And for that, you really can't beat adequate sleep and good nutrition and possibly the judicious use of caffeine. So the bottom line, ketone drinks might sound high-tech and cutting edge, but for most active people, especially young athletes, they are expensive, they're unproven, and they're possibly counterproductive. If you're interested in more on energy bars, sports drinks, and eating for athletic performance, I've put together a playlist to some past episodes that you might find useful, and you will find a link to that in our show notes for today. Thanks to everyone who has sent in questions. And once again, if you have a question you'd like me to answer, you can email it to me at nutrition@quickanddirtytips.com. Nutrition Diva is a Quick and Dirty Tips podcast. Holly Hutchings is our director of podcast. Steve Riekeberg is our audio engineer. Morgan Christensen heads up podcast operations and advertising. Thanks also to Nat Hoops for his support. And most of all, thanks to you for listening.